Everybody, it's Dave Curlin. I'm sorry about the late start this morning. We had a little technical difficulties. It's called the computer crashes when the webinar is supposed to start, and you can't start the webinar because you need to reboot the computer. Wonderful timing, but nonetheless, we'll make it up to you right now. Before we get going, I just want to ask two quick questions. I'll ask them in the form of polls, just so I have a better idea who's in the audience. First question is, what is your role? And you can choose from OMG partner, C-level executive, sales leadership role, HR, or learning and development. Okay. Looks like just about everybody has clicked something. 95% of the votes are in, and I'll close that. So half of you are in a sales leadership role, and the rest are spread between all those other choices. And the only other thing I want to know is, are you a current or past user of Objective Management Group's assessments? And that's either a yes, a no, or if you're on as a partner, you can indicate that. Oh, this is terrific. So for the 2/3 of you who are not current or past users of OMG, welcome. I hope you find today's webinar insightful and helpful and convincing and powerful, and that you want to join the 10,000 companies that use OMG as part of their business. I'm not going to talk a lot about OMG other than our company was voted the top sales assessment tool in the world 2 years in a row, won the gold medal from Top Sales and Marketing Awards. And I want to get right to the magic. So what is the magic in OMG's assessments, and why are we always talked about in that kind of a context? And it's undoubtedly because of our accuracy and our predictive validity. Here's an example. Of the candidates, and we're talking strictly about our candidate assessments right now, of the candidates that we do not recommend for a position, but our smarter than us clients hire them anyhow because they like them so much, 75% of those candidates fail within 6 months, and the rest of them are never more than B players. So I have another question for you right now, and that is about your track record hiring salespeople. 3 choices of the salespeople you've typically hired. Have most met or exceeded your high expectations? Have some met or exceeded your high expectations? Or a few met or exceeded your high expectations? Okay, so I'll stop the voting there at about the 35-second mark, and what it looks like is only 12% were able to say most have met or exceeded high expectations, and the rest are at some and few. So it's 89% who are only able to say, it's up to 90% now. 90% of you, some or few have met high expectations. And it's not a lot saying some and a few saying few. It's pretty well spread between the two. Okay, so that's kind of normal. So basically, here's another statistic. You can study this infographic, or you can just take my summary, which is out of all the candidates that we do recommend, who clients then interview and hire, 92% of those salespeople end up in the top half of their sales force within 1 year. And when it comes to predictive validity, ours is as high as it gets, 95% predictive validity. But all of this is based on using it correctly. So what is predictive validity? Because there are all kinds of validations. Every assessment has validation. But some of them are as lame as face validity. Face validity is where you look at the questions that are asked and you say, yes, this appears to test for what they say it tests for. So you can earn validation with as lame a criteria as face validity. The questions look like questions that might lead to something. And then there's construct validity, where the findings seem to be linked to what it is that you say you're testing for. So you have some kind of a sales finding and it's a sales assessment. That qualifies for construct validity. Predictive validity is the most difficult, most time-consuming, most costly validation to do. Very, very, very few assessments go after predictive validity. Why? Because they're not predictive. All the personality assessments that you know and all the behavioral styles assessments that you know are not predictive of sales results. That is, on-the-job sales performance. So ours is predictive validity, 95% accuracy in terms of predicting on-the-job success. How valid, how predictive could an assessment be when it asks a question like this one? Choose the word that most describes you and the word that least describes you in a work situation. Gentle, persuasive, humble, original. It's a person's opinion, and it's got nothing to do with selling. So we don't use questions like that. But all of the results that someone would get from using an assessment is based on using those assessments correctly. So it's important that when you're using an assessment, especially a sales assessment, sales candidate assessment like ours, that you assess early and disqualify in order to save time. So let me ask you another question here, which is about when you've used assessments historically. Do you assess candidates right after you receive a resume, after you review the resumes, after you talk to candidates by phone, after you have final candidates, or do you rarely or never use assessments on your sales candidates? Okay, at the 42nd mark, 2/3 of you have voted, and 44% of you said you rarely or never use them. Only 31% of you are using them after you have final candidates, which means you've gone through the entire recruiting process and perhaps wasted time on candidates that shouldn't even be in the pool. Only 6% of you are using them at the appropriate time, which is right after you receive a resume, so you can weed out all the people that you shouldn't be spending time on. This little infographic compares what most companies do, the traditional but ineffective way on the left-hand side, which takes 20 hours to hire a salesperson, gives you a 50-50 chance of success, versus our proprietary and effective method, which only takes 5 hours and leads to a better than 90% success rate in hiring who you want to hire. So one of the reasons that our predictive validity is so high and our accuracy is so good, and we recommend the right candidates, is the level of customization that we go through. So we're able to identify candidates that will succeed in a specific sales role at your company, selling your product or service into your specific market or markets, to your ideal decision maker, against your particular competition, at your particular price points, and factoring in all of your various selling challenges. So highly customized. We already know from the 650,000 salespeople we've already assessed at more than 10,000 companies, what it takes, what the sales DNA looks like, what the combination of strengths and skills needs to be. But then we take it one step further and we marry what we know to what you need, to what your salespeople must be able to do in order to succeed. And we end up with a highly customized role configuration. So let's take a sneak preview at the assessment itself so you can get a sense for what it is we share with clients. So this is the candidate dashboard. It's the second page of a 21-page report. But most of what you need to know can be found on this candidate dashboard. So the most important thing is the recommendation. That's right there in the middle of the page. So it's either going to say not recommended, or it's going to say recommended, or it'll say recommended with ideal ramp-up, or which means somebody who's a recommended candidate that'll ramp up quickly, or it's going to say recommended perfect candidate. And in this particular sample, it was a perfect candidate. If I can draw your attention up here to where it says perfect fit index, that's what we're referring to with a perfect candidate. Yes, Sean?
The slide's not changing right now. It's still on the last poll.
I can fix that.
There we go.
Okay, so this is what I was just talking about. The recommendation in the middle of the dashboard. And this particular example is a perfect candidate, which refers to the perfect fit index. So based on a benchmarking exercise where we've evaluated the existing sales organization and correlated top sales performers with those salespeople who also assessed as top sales performers, we're able to identify 10 to 20 factors and scores that differentiate those top performers from everybody else. So this particular candidate hit on 100% of those factors. So they scored 100 on the perfect fit index. They're recommended as a perfect candidate. The next thing we look at are some of the most important findings. The first one here that I'm showing you is the will to sell. The best way to describe the will to sell is if you follow sporting events. If you follow basketball, for example, the last 2 minutes of a basketball game are commonly called crunch time. That's where most basketball games are won or lost. And at the end of those games, you'll often hear the broadcasters say, it wasn't pretty, but they found a way to win. Okay, that's the will to win. In this case, we measure the will to sell. It's 4 crucial elements. How badly they want to succeed at selling. How committed they are to doing whatever it takes to achieve the sales success that they want. Whether or not they take responsibility for their results, and how good their outlook is. So all 4 of those things contribute to the will to sell. And someone who lacks desire or lacks commitment, and this isn't drive like in a personality assessment. I'll give you an example. If you gave a personality assessment, you pick anything from caliper to a behavioral styles like DISC and anything in between. They all have some kind of finding that sounds like drive. If you gave that to every member of your executive leadership team, everybody would come up showing drive, high drive. That's how you got where you are. But if you gave them our sales candidate assessment, most of the people sitting around that table would likely have lack of desire, because sales success on a personal level to them isn't important. They're not there to go out and be salespeople. So they won't have desire for success in sales, even though they may have strong drive, which is the best example I can give you between the difference between this assessment and most of the assessments out there that you might be familiar with. The next thing we look at is DNA. And DNA, we want to know if they have weaknesses or a combination of weaknesses, especially the big ones, the ones that can get in the way, that might prevent them from being able to succeed. And the key number here is the one that's highlighted in blue. It's combined severity. So one of the things we feature is a sliding scale. Depending on the difficulty or the challenge of the particular role that you're hiring a salesperson for, that difficulty level changes. At the top end of the scale, for example, if your salespeople must sell 6- and 7-figure deals to CEOs of Fortune 1000 companies, that is an extremely difficult selling role because of all the resistance and all the competition and how difficult it is to get with a CEO of Fortune 1000 company, never mind the difficulty of getting them to sign off for a 6- or 7-figure deal. On the other hand, if your salespeople are getting in a little truck and calling on convenience stores, stocking the shelves with a cola or a snack or a nylon, that would probably be on the low end of the difficulty scale. And each one of those difficulty levels has a companion number, which is the maximum severity of the weaknesses we would allow for that position. So in this one, it's a moderate difficulty position. We allow severity up to 160. This particular sample candidate was very strong, very good DNA. The combined severity of the major weaknesses was only 59. Then we're looking at some other key findings, whether or not they enjoy selling, how motivated they are, whether they're rejection-proof, coachable, and trainable. Now, I've got motivated highlighted because that's one of the data points that has changed dramatically in the last 5 years since the economic crisis. We used to be looking for money-motivated salespeople. There aren't many out there anymore. Some of the old-timers like me, the old-school salespeople like me, are still money-motivated, but most salespeople are no longer money-motivated. So we now look to determine how a salesperson is motivated in addition to determining how motivated they are. So this refers to total motivation, but in the detail of the report you can learn whether it's an intrinsically motivated salesperson, someone who's motivated by recognition, praise, success, mastery, love of what they're doing, or even a chip on their shoulder, versus someone who's extrinsically motivated. That's the traditional money-motivated salesperson who's motivated by things and rewards and perks and adult toys like boats, planes, automobiles, things like that. And then the bottom half of this dashboard has whether or not the candidate meets the requirements that the client spec'd. And we have 36 different variables that the client can spec on. In this case, the client didn't have a lot of specific things that are different from our standard requirements. They were looking for someone who can sell a high-ticket solution, someone who could sell value, and someone who could sell it to top executives. And the other things here weren't required. I have one particular thing highlighted in blue just to explain what it is, because it might not be obvious, an evangelizer. For us, most salespeople are selling a why me product or service. For example, let's take copiers and printers. Every business has them. So when the lease expires on your current copier or printer, you're going to buy another one, or you're going to lease another one. There's already a line item for that. It's a foregone conclusion there will be another copier printer lease or purchase. So it's not a question of whether you'll buy another copier or printer. It's a question of which one and from who. That's what most selling is. It's not nearly as difficult. You don't have to sell anything except why me. Then there are a lot of services and products where before you can do why me, you have to sell the why, which is this is a company that wasn't necessarily predisposed to buying what you have. and they have to be shown the benefits of buying something in the first place before we even get to why would you get it from us. So that requires an evangelizer. And then we have some important scores and ratings. And the sales quotient, you could see that as an overall score on the assessment. That's a scale that goes up to 173. Anybody over 135 is a really good salesperson. The figure it out factor tells us how quickly this candidate will ramp up compared to the norm. Any score over 75 is a candidate that will take off and hit the ground running. 90 is an excellent score. We already talked about the perfect fit index. This candidate had 100. The sales posturing index, that's the salesperson who's memorable and makes a good first impression and is credible and believable and develops a good relationship and listens to the prospect and is able to differentiate themselves from the field. Anything over a 55 is a good score. Growth potential is how much room for improvement they still have. Now, when we evaluate an existing sales force, we're looking for very high scores there. We want to know that your salespeople can do 2 or 3 times better than they're doing right now. But when you're bringing candidates on, you're looking for strong candidates. You're looking for candidates that can have an immediate impact on revenue. So we tend to want a lower growth potential there. You'd want people who are already pretty well developed. Profile compatibility, that's how compatible the candidate is with those 36 variables that we spec. And then the confidence factor is how confident we are in the results that we're providing to you based on about a dozen embedded checkpoints in our assessment where we check to see whether the candidate is taking the assessment honestly or whether they're trying to fool or fake out the test. And anything over a 6 is a good score. And then the longevity prediction is the likelihood that this candidate will stick around for you to achieve a 5x return on your investment in the candidate. Now, this becomes more and more important the longer your sales cycle is. So if you're selling to major corporations or the government and you have an incredibly long sales cycle, and incredibly long, we're talking more than 18 months, then before you go and select a salesperson, no matter how good they are, then you have to know they're going to be around 3 years from now to pay off and return the investment that you made in them while you subsidized them for the first 18 months. It's not as big a deal if you have a 3-month sales cycle. So in working with Objective Management Group, it's very easy to get started with us. Our assessments are extremely easy to use. We can set you up for multiple roles in multiple locations. Everything is very fast. It's very accurate, very powerful and insightful. We will save you a tremendous amount of time that you are currently wasting with ineffective processes and wasting time on candidates that shouldn't be in your pool, wasting candidates doing multiple interviews on the wrong candidates, and making sure that you're spending time on the right candidates. We can help you prevent very expensive hiring mistakes. We're on a subscription basis, so that means you get to use an unlimited number of candidate assessments to reach your hiring goals. It also means that you have a financial incentive to use assessments the right way and be EEOC compliant. EEOC, by the way, says if you're going to use an assessment, you have to use it on every candidate. And today, someone becomes a candidate as soon as you've received an electronic resume. So that's changed over the years. So if you're waiting till later in the process to assess, you are not compliant with the EEOC. The subscription allows you to control your costs. You know exactly what it's going to cost you this year. We price it according to the number of hires that you're going to make over 6 to 12 months. And our subscriptions start at $2,500 annually. So let me ask you one more of my poll questions. and that's, are you interested in learning more about OMG? And this is a simple yes or no. And as soon as you're done answering this question, I'm going to open up to questions and answers, because I've gone through the things that I need to show you in 30 minutes, and then I can answer some of your specific questions. I'll keep this slide up for another 10 seconds, give you a chance to click one of those two buttons. Okay, I'm going to close that now. And now I'll open it up to questions and answers. There's two ways to ask a question. You can either raise your hand. There's a little hand up icon that you can click, and I can call on you and unmute you. Or you can type your question in using the question function in the control panel, and I can answer that way. So let's give everybody a minute or so to come up with their questions. And any question is fair game here. Okay, so Sherry asks, can this be an online assessment? It is an online assessment, Sherry. You configure the role specification online. We get you set up online. You have a link that allows you to manage that online role specification, and you have a separate link for each of those roles that you can provide to your candidates on an automated basis. And your second question was, have we used these for financial advisors? Oh, yes. The financial services industry, that sector as a whole, is a huge part of our client base. Amy asks, what is the cost? Well, the subscriptions start at $2,500 annually, and depends on how many salespeople you be hiring. Arun asks, when will we provide recording? Are you referring to the recording of this webinar or something else? Tom asks, are there solutions available and recommended for some or all of the weaknesses discovered? That would be a development side, and we sell our assessments through partners. Those are local experts. So those people all have the capabilities to provide development solutions to you. So yes. Sherry asks, if we hire 300, what is the cost over and above the subscription? Assuming that's hire 300 and not assess 300. And Sherry, one of the things that we would do is, usually when the number is that big, very often the organization has high turnover. So it may not be that you need to hire 300 when it's a high turnover situation. Sometimes, if you're experiencing 70% turnover and you're just churning people, we can end up giving you a license to hire 100, because we expect that the people you hire using this selection method and the interviewing skills that we teach around it to stick, because you'll be getting the right people in the first place. So I would expect that a subscription for between 100 and 300 is going to be somewhere between $40,000 and $75,000. That's for hiring 100, not assessing 100, hiring 100. Okay, Arun, you said you're referring to the webinar, so that recording should be available later today. And if you want a link to that, you can just request that from Sean. His email is sean@objectivemanagement.com, and he'll get a link to you if you want to share that with other people in the company. Tom, I'm recognizing your hand, and you're unmuted. What's your question? I can't hear you, Tom, so you must be muted on your end. Here you are.
I hit the wrong button.
Oh, okay.
I'm fine, thanks.
All right, good. Does anybody else have a question? All right, then thank you all for joining us today. Appreciate the questions. Appreciate you being here. And if you have any further questions, certainly you can send us an email. Send it right to Sean, and he'll get that to me, and I'll get it answered for you today. Good luck.